The instruments and support you need for your industry. PCWI porosity holiday detectors. Low voltage wet sponge testing. Should we be saying goodbye to this dinosaur? I know that I said, should we be saying goodbye to this dinosaur? What I should have said is, we should be saying goodbye to this dinosaur of a test. With advances in electronics in high voltage DC detectors, the wet sponge test has become a dinosaur. PCWI porosity holiday detectors, we make a vast range of brass brushware and coils to suit these instruments, all makes and models. You should have seen the previous video called Low Voltage Wet Sponge Testing, its use and its history, and then maybe come back to this one. Although the electronics are the latest, the concept of the test is not. With wet sponge testing, you can see here a vast amount of differing flaws in a coating. A low voltage wet sponge test would only find flaw number 1. That would also be dependent on the floor's diameter, coating thickness, and the floor's capability of being wetted out. So why would you specify a wet sponge test? It is slow to use, it is a wet test, and you can only find a flaw exposing the actual bare substrate. You could do the test with high voltage DC porosity holiday detector set low as a dry test and find most if not all of those flaws and get coating longevity. Statements being made by some about the wet sponge unit's capabilities are totally incorrect. The wet sponge test cannot find what we would consider to be a flaw in the coating. A wet sponge unit can only find one type of flaw, and that flaw must also be able to be wetted out. Fine pinholes may not wet out very well. Floors must also have the bare substrate actually exposed in order for this unit to complete the electrical circuit to sound the alarm. Some reasons why the low voltage wet sponge test still exists. Because of long-running misinformation about the high-voltage DC detectors and the damage that they may cause on the thinner films. Because of the lack of knowledge, information about the advances in electronics in the latest DC detectors, especially constant current enabling testing at very low voltages. Standards lacking behind the latest technology. Industry's lack of communication with standards committees. Coating specifiers, lack of knowledge or not being informed, although they tend to work with set standards. Standards do allow for high voltage DC testing of films of 150 microns and up. Wet sponge testing equipment can be purchased at a much lower cost, although the test takes much longer to do. So why is it then a standard states that you can test a thin film of 150 microns and up with high voltage DC detector, yet we find the wet sponge test still being specified and then even up to 500 microns and beyond? A little note here, should you decide to use a high voltage DC detector, not a pulse DC, make sure the probe that you use is a fine bristle brass wire brush. Do not use a carbonized rubber neoprene probe. Why? Watch the video. Porosity holiday testing, you need to know this. I'd like to make a recommendation. If you've seen all the relevant videos that we have posted, you should use the data to update the information you have. PCWI instrumentation, the instruments and support you need for your industry. For sales and service, contact sales@pcwi.com.au.